Welcome back to College Football Addiction. We've got Drake C. Toll locked on Big 12 here with us. Our video presented by BetUS. More on them later. Drake, we've got some hot seat updates going into a very pivotal 2025 for some coaches in the Big 12. Let's start the other side, though. Who are the safest three coaches in the Big 12 right now?
Well, that's pretty easy. You got to start with the new guys. Scott Frost at UCF could go 2-10 next season. He still has another year on his job. You can't say it about every coach. If Sonny Dykes goes 2-10 or Dave Aranda goes 2-10, they could both be fired from their jobs. I think when you're looking at the scope of any team in college football, they bring a first-year head coach in and they get a mulligan. So Brent Brennan at Arizona, while he will likely be fired in the offseason, he got a mulligan because it was his first season this year. Now, if you're Rich Rodriguez, Scott Frost, you feel safe, but I don't know if anybody's safer as far as tenured coaches go than everything that's been displayed to us by Coach Campbell in Ames. I think he has proven to be the great reviver of a program that was never really a program. They had never won 10 games before. He finally does that this year. And every time we start to question Matt Campbell, he just finds a way to win at the highest level. So there are certainly the Kalani Sitakes who are very good and very safe. But if that guy goes 2-10, we start asking a lot of questions. If Matt Campbell goes 2-10, there's nothing that could be done to replace him in Ames, Iowa. He's bought himself a whole lot of time with 11-1, and Kenny Dillingham may be the first runner-up out of those three. If we take out the new head coaches, Dillingham is absolutely on that list. If Arizona State goes 2-10 next season, Dillingham has as long of a leash as he wants the next 3 years, in my opinion, because he's taken them to the college football playoff, almost won a game there, and proven that university can win at football, which has been hard for even legends like Herm Edwards to do. So Matt Campbell up there, Kenny Dillingham, Rich Rodriguez, Scott Frost come to mind immediately as guys that cannot lose their job no matter what happens this season, barring a major scandal.
I'm a little surprised. Sataki, Sanders, probably maybe in that very next tier, right there with them. It'd be pretty hard to imagine.
And a small addendum to that. The reason I didn't include Dion, it's also the reason I didn't include a guy like Mike Gundy, who's also got a lot of tenure. I'll get to Gundy later, because I could see them leaving. This should be a conversation of not just hot seat, but guys who in the offseason could make a jump. Do I think Dion will? No. But I know Kenny Dillingham, an alumni of the school, is much more likely to be at Arizona State next offseason no matter what than maybe a Deion Sanders, who is still such a big name.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, let's go the other way. Let's go the way we started this thing. Hot seat. Who is in the most trouble? Who's in the most danger? Let's do your top one, and then we'll talk about some other candidates too. Whose seat is flaming, as you can see from that graphic down there on the bottom?
Well, Scott Satterfield is not in a good spot. He will be fired next offseason from Cincinnati. And I took a lot of flack in saying that this year on Locked On Big 12 and had a lot of Bearcats fans that said that I'm the issue, not Scott Satterfield, but me.
It's Drake's fault.
Come to find out, maybe it is Scott Satterfield after all. What I want to mention before that, though, and he is my number one, what I want to really dig into before that, Luke Fickell at Wisconsin, according to coacheshotseat.com, is the number one hottest seat in America. He leaves a Big 12 school, a team that's moving into a new conference, moving up into a different conference. And he goes to Wisconsin to go to the Big 10 instead of staying with Cincinnati, and has fallen flat on his face. He's now the number one hottest seat in America. Lincoln Riley leaves Oklahoma and decides, I'm going to go do my own thing in USC, number 3 hottest seat in the country. Number 4, Brent Venables. Oh, we're mighty Oklahoma. We're going to leave the Big 12, go to the SEC and dominate, be able to swim and survive. Nope. Now Brent Venables, the top 5 hottest seats in the country. So interesting to see Big 12 connections, guys who have left the Big 12, schools that have left the Big 12 that are all struggling across college football. Maybe the grass isn't always greener, but like I mentioned, Scott Satterfield is number one when it comes to Big 12 coaches and their seat being hot. That's because he's going into year 3 and has not really progressed, and he lost a lot in the transfer portal, didn't gain enough in the transfer portal. Brent Brennan is pretty close behind him at Arizona. Most of the fans of the Wildcats would agree that he was handed the keys to a pretty darn nice vehicle, Mercedes-Benz, and then wrecked it.
I will get right back to chatting with Drake, but first, I want to tell you about our friends over at BetUS. The Super Bowl coming up in a little over a week. If you're betting on that, if you're betting on college hoops, if you're betting on anything sports related, make sure you're doing it with our friends over at BetUS. Right now, you can use our code YouTube150 to get a 150% sign up bonus on your first deposit, 125% on your next two. All of that up to $2,000. We appreciate BetUS for their support this season and hope that you'll be betting with them.
I mean, crashed it straight into the pavement this season with Tet McMillan and Noah Fafita. They were putrid. Now, his transfer portal class is not bad whatsoever. Top 40, if you ask, 24/7. So Brennan has at least gotten a C+ grade on the offseason. That's not going to help him if he doesn't win games. Brent Brennan, Scott Satterfield, 1A and 1B next season, even though Brennan is only in his second year at Arizona. I can tell you this, Arizona State going to the college football playoff didn't help Brennan whatsoever.
Yeah. Arizona up there. You mentioned Cincinnati. Who else is maybe not flaming hot like those two, but who else would you maybe keep your eye on, need to perform this season to avoid conversations?
We are in an interesting level of the Big 12 where there are two head coaches that I don't think are directly on the hot seat. You could argue Mike Gundy is, but I'm going to keep him off the hot seat. I'm going to keep Kyle Whittingham off the hot seat because they're in the tenure seat, the kind of pissed off tenure seat where they've been there for a long time and fans are like, dude, just win. Well, why can't we? What happened last season? Can you please just win? So for those two guys, I look at them as, man, they might be forced into retirement. If each of those coaches goes 3-9 this year, I'm not sure if they'd be outright fired, but the conversation would be had with an athletic director, hey, we're going to go ahead and mutually part ways, or you're going to step down and retire and take a severance or pension or something. And so I've got Kyle Whittingham and Mike Gundy both in the same boat, having been there a couple of decades apiece. They have helped build those programs. They're the greatest coach of each program all time. But you either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become a villain. And I think each of those are making that quote very true at their universities. So when we're talking about that next tier of coaches that might not be there at the end of the offseason next year, a big piece of that conversation are guys who are long tenured but need to get a job done soon. Otherwise, they'll be forced into retirement.
Maybe outside of Cincinnati, and maybe Arizona too. Which coach has the toughest job in 2025? Like, what's the hardest based on just the outlook for 2025? Who has the toughest job this year?
I still think Kansas should be put in that conversation. We're looking at a new era, Kansas. I said last offseason they would go to the Big 12 championship, win the Big 12 championship. That's not a very easy job. The Jayhawks still need a lot of work, and Leipold proved that by missing a bowl game, going 5-7 this last year. Offensive coordinator leaves, quarterback struggles. You've got question marks next season. Well, I still probably have Kansas in the top 10 of the Big 12 and going to a bowl game. That's a very tough place to win because much of the culture or lack thereof is still in that athletic department. And Jayhawks fans were pretty disappointed this season where they played most of their games on the road, all their games actually on the road or at these neutral sites that they had to craft because their football stadium is undergoing construction. It was just a funky, bad year for the Jayhawks. So spinning it, turning it around, not going to be easy for Lance Leipold. And Willie Fritz. I think Willie Fritz still has a lot that is that it's similar to a Kansas, right? Houston was good, but they were good at the mid-major level. Now they're in the Power 5. We have to rework our culture, and maybe the head coach who won 10 games there, Dana Holgerson, got fired. That's never a good spot to be in. Fritz is a great football coach. He still needs 3 or 4 years to build that Houston program. They're going to have to be patient. So I'm not saying they're in a bad spot. They're just in a spot of patience. And like you mentioned, you can't overlook Arizona, Cincinnati, two schools that are in different boats. Arizona never really been good at football. Your head coach, Brent Brennan, is in charge of changing that. And for Cincinnati, they've been to a college football playoff. And now they might have to fire their next head coach who followed up Luke Fickell. Don't be shocked if this time next year, Luke Fickell is the head man again at Cincinnati, a Scott Frost type situation, trying to lead them back to glory.
You heard it here first. Where can you hear more from yourself, Drake C. Toll?
Yeah, at LO Big 12 or at Drake C. Toll on Twitter and wherever you find your podcasts with Locked On Big 12.
Man, I appreciate you. I appreciate BetUS for their support. We'll talk to you soon, bud.
Always, TJ.